Welcome to Service Talk. My name's Justin.
And this is Jamie. And today we have a very special guest, State House Representative Katie Dempsey from District 13.
The Velvet Hammer.
The Velvet Hammer. And so we're going to be actually getting to talk to Katie about, her role in the assembly and what bills she got passed in the special session and this past session over the last 40 days and kind of just an insight into her and, what her goals are and what she didn't get passed and like where she wants to go in politics.
Absolutely. And we're going to get her opinion on some key pieces of legislation that were brought up in this past legislative cycle as well. Some very controversial issues that we would like just to be able to hear her input on. So,
absolutely.
So stick around and pay attention and stay tuned. And welcome back to Conservatives Talk. As always, we want to remind you to like and share all the content that we produce and we put out there. And remember to subscribe to every platform where you see us posting all of our content. And if you're able to, please go to our website at, no longer there, but conservativestalk.org. It's spelled out conservativestalk.org, and hit the sponsor tab at the top right-hand corner and help us out where you can. It really helps Jamie and I to be able to produce all this content that we have put out there. It helps us to upgrade on our equipment like you see here in front of us. So if you can help us out, please help us out where you can.
And as a reminder, it's 45 days until the primary election and 215 days until we beat Stacey Abrams.
Exactly. I love it. I love that. We're gonna have to keep running with that.
I know we got to keep running with it.
Yes.
It's because we have to make sure that we maintain Republican control. It's going to be very important. And again, we reiterate this every show. We got to get out and vote. If we sit at home for any reason after the primary, it's our fault that we would lose the state.
Right. If you don't vote, it's your fault.
Absolutely. So we have a very special guest.
Yes, we do.
Let's kind of roll into it. We want to welcome Ms. Katie Dempsey. Hello, Katie.
Hello. Good to see y'all.
Good to see you. Thank you for joining us on the show. And we kind of want, I'm ready to jump right into it.
Absolutely.
So, Katie, kind of give us some insight into what your role is inside of the Georgia Assembly.
Well, I'm fortunate to be a chairman. And so that gives me entree to a lot of things because all the chairmen work together. But the particular arena where I am is appropriations. And the majority of the chairmen, as well as the big chairman of appropriations, are all in one big suite. It's like a family in there. We all are trying to figure out ways to get each other's money actually and put it in the best places where Georgia needs it the most. We work together a very team way. We have retreat during the summer to plan for each year. And so that would be the biggest role that I have. But, the main thing is that I am there to represent our community, Rome and Floyd County. I'm so fortunate today speaking with our pro tem. She really thought I had more than one county. And I have the largest amount of Floyd County now in this upcoming election that I will have ever had. I have 60% and almost the entirety of the city of Rome. And I'm so grateful for that, to represent good people, to listen to them and what their concerns are and be there for them.
Okay. So you mentioned you're the chairman of one of the subcommittees in appropriations. Do you sit on any other committees?
I do. I'm on about 7. So energy, utilities, and telecommunications, health and human services, higher ed, economic development and tourism, transportation and rules, as well as appropriations. And then there are other appointments that I have as well that are very involved with mental health and children's issues, elder care as well. So there are appointments that are on other committees too.
I got you. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I know you've been very influential in children and mental health and elder health and things of that nature.
And a lot of those committees directly affect Floyd County, especially transportation, infrastructure,
tourism,
communication,
absolutely,
tourism,
energy, everything.
Those are some major ones that we
Yeah.
And I'm glad we have good leadership in there.
And like kind of leading into that, Katie, can you kind of talk to us about some of the impact that some of these things have had on Rome and Floyd County and how it's, some, benefited for
Yeah.
us?
You know, all of governance really is about relationship, at least at the state level, it is. So those relationships that are built between the local community and the members in the legislature, and then keeping strong also relationships with our federal partners. It's just so important. But many things have come to Rome over the years. You can look in the budget and find a lot of it. You can start with education. You can think of the benefits that go to our K-12 schools, which have been expanded greatly in this most recent budget, and the employees, the teachers getting a big pay raise is huge and well deserved. Healthcare benefits. The Floyd Medical Center, through relationships, has that temporary, but it's coming somewhat permanent now, structure out in front of it that helped deal with the really huge increase in COVID patients, and make sure we were ready and could thrive and strive through that time. Economic development is certainly huge, and I know that those who work in that field here are very closely aligned with our state. In the next couple of weeks, I know we have several commissioners too coming to visit Rome to work on some very specific needs. Commissioner Nunn will be coming, and he is with Department of Community Affairs. Candace Broach will be here, who does DHS and DFAX. So it's important that we continue to stay on their radar and make sure that they see the good things that are happening in Floyd as well as the needs.
Well, there
Absolutely.
are some great things that are going on in Floyd. I will say that.
Oh yeah. I mean, Floyd is one of the strongest parts of Northwest Georgia, and Katie being a senior member down there, as a lot of that is contributed to why Floyd and Rome is so strong across the strait.
Now, if we can just get our Board of Education on board.
But it's just been it's been great
Jamie
watching the things. I'm not touching that subject. I mean, just seeing, because a lot of people don't necessarily know all the influential things because Katie's so humble and so modest about how she goes about things. She's been very impactful in this area, and primarily Rome and Floyd County, but it stretches across the entire Northwest Georgia region.
Oh, absolutely,
and across the state. Just it's very impactful what you've done over the years.
Thank you. It's a privilege to do that. It really is. I don't take it for granted. I do prefer just to get in there and do the work rather than talk about it a lot. But I guess it's time that it's one of those seasons where I've got to tell my story a little bit.
Yeah, every once in a while, it is necessary to get out and brag on yourself somewhat, especially when it comes to re-elections and everything. So, a little bit on that topic, we can move a little bit more into kind of the meat of what we're wanting to talk about. Can you? So we just
let's start with the special session.
We just closed out this past session, but before that, we had a special session involving redistricting and reappropriations reapportionment throughout the entire state, and getting all of our districts realigned and everything per the Constitution. So I know you had a very special piece of legislation that was pushed through during that time involving Floyd County specifically. Can you give us a little insight into that?
No, we did. We had two measures, and it was a teamwork effort with the entire Floyd County delegation. So Senator Hufstedler, Representative Lumsden, and Representative Scoggins and I all worked on this. We worked quickly because there are several steps you have to take when you want to address elections and changing anything about an elections board. And while we knew that for some time there had been challenges here, we seemed to be the last place in the state to have our votes counted and different things that are not impacted just by this most recent election. There were even long-term challenges. So the minute that board faced the reality that the 3-member board was not enough to handle the workload, actually, and the county commission agreed with them, we were ready to file the appropriate public notice and quickly do 2 bills in the special session. And there was not a lot that could be done in special session other than redistricting, but this was one of the places where you could go to work. So we did two measures, and they're kind of the bill. I know people are used to saying HB or SB and a number behind it, but these are like have an EX after it because it's the special one. So a 9EX and 8EX. And 9 actually had to abolish the Board of Elections. You have to take something away and change the legislation and the code that was from 1986 to build a new one. So first one actually took it away, abolished it, and then we reconstituted and reestablished a new board with new parameters. And I think it holds great hope right now for where we can go in I'm going to be very anxious to see, not only because I'm on the ballot, but because it matters here. I can't wait to see if we can get the turnaround much quicker and more exact. And they should be able to, between the new board and also the law. Actually, SB 202 made a big difference of things that must be done. There's not a lot of leeway in how you transfer the information and data that is collected within those voting machines.
Absolutely. And I can honestly say I am extremely thankful for what y'all did when it comes to the voter board, especially when it comes to the failure. And this is, of course, this is my personal opinion on this, but the failure of the county commission in enacting the law that y'all worked so hard to get passed and pushed through, and took such great heat on trying to get that passed through. And the failure that they
I will say this. I will say this. Again, so our first show kind of covered SB 202, and then it's kind of led into some other things about this particular topic. And they were just. I understand their position. I understand where they happen, and I'm
on the side with them.
I'm very thankful for our state delegation for what they did.
Yeah,
because again, this is the denouement of 2020 was the denouement of what had been going on. You can go back all the way to 2009, 2010 to when
what she was saying.
when we had these issues. I remember the first kind of election that I kind of helped work in. We faced a very similar situation to where Floyd County was last. Even after Fulton County, we were still waiting for our stuff to finish being counted here, which made no sense, especially for the time period that we're in. And I think it's going to be
when they lose almost 3,000 ballots too.
Well, I mean, when you put it all together, right? When you put it all together of a new board, a new state law, and then some of the other things that were passed during this regular session. We have a great opportunity here to see some very needed improvements.
Absolutely. And that is thanks to our state delegation.
Absolutely.
Absolutely nothing to do with our county delegation.
Well, Justin likes to be confrontational.
Well, when you fail the people, you get held accountable.
I don't think that's what happened.
So, all right.
Well, we gave them the tools with this. We really did give them the tools.
Exactly.
Many people didn't know, but all of the election employees too had civil servant status, which really meant that they had no authority over. So this cleaned up that measure, and their equality and fairness in the hiring and firing process is certainly really important. If you want to have good outcomes, you have to be able to be held accountable, I think.
Quality
absolutely.
People
completely agree.
Places.
So, Katie, let's fast forward to this current session. Let's talk about some of the legislation that you were able to do or be a part of, and kind of what your thoughts are on what got passed.
What was the biggest bill that you were able to champion to get through this session?
Well, it's always the budget. I'm going to tell you what, we work on that nonstop, and we work on it year round. And this was a profound, both budgets. This will be the 11th year that I have chaired the human resources component of the budget. And it's very powerful. And that means 11 amended budgets and 11 of the big budget. So that's 22 budget cycles of working through. I've learned it. I understand it. The part of the budget I have too is not formula driven like education or some of our healthcare. It really comes at moments from the generosity of savings that we find in other parts in the state. But our amended budget, it was $30.3 billion, I think, once we went back in there, and it revised the revenue expectations, and we were just able to do so much, really, to return particularly over $1 billion to state taxpayers. How wonderful is that? That sign that's done, it's coming. if they have already filed, they will be receiving a check if they filed in 20 and 21 for the, well, and the year is later. So if they filed in 21 and 22 in essence, but for the income that they had in the other years, they will get, if they are filing joint, it will be $500. If it's a single, it will be $250. If it's someone who has already filed, they'll be getting a check for that. So, that's really exciting, returning that money. And then I think another thing that we did that is so profound is going ahead and stepping up and rolling back the state gas tax. It's making a difference in people's pocketbooks every day, how they can get to work. Whew. We have so many people that travel, and I was shown it was sent to me by text by someone not too far from here who drives an 18-wheeler. That's their livelihood. And they filled up one day, and filled all the way up. I think they had driven it till it was almost empty. And those tanks can hold a lot. And it was almost $1,000 at its highest point. So people or in that industry were having to make decisions on how far they could go, where they could go. And now many are deciding to come to Georgia to fill up. They'll plan their trip. They'll leave, one of our ports, even in Florida, or coming from the north, or driving to California with produce, and stop in Georgia to fill up because our gas is a little more reasonable than our neighbors right now. Oh, yeah. So, that's it. The budget also addressed great strides in education and mental health and social services, public safety. Those are two things, both in the amended and in the big budget. And in the big budget this year, we did so much to go along with the mental health parity bill to really increase the services there. And it's not just mental health, it's addiction, it's developmental disabilities, it's some of the huge disparities that people face, it's Alzheimer's, it's heartbreaking situations that we should feel very responsible and very proud of those dollars, and the tightening of opportunity to actually be there and give hope to those who live with mental health, to those who live in addiction, who live with Alzheimer's, who persevere through developmental disabilities. It's so important, So that's the big thing. But I would say too that there were so many important bills this year. We did so many things. I had several personal ones. One that deals with licensing, something I'd never done before, but to deal with licensing applied behavioral analysts, those who provide services, particularly also not just to people with developmental disabilities, our Down syndrome children, so many autism, but also many elder care, as well as traumatic brain injuries. So to make sure that those clinicians are licensed and have had the proper testing and training and the oversight. There are some people coming to our community that may have, not just our community, our state, I should say that have some training and know some about it. But it's really important. It's a consumer protection to know that you are dealing with someone who is very well qualified to provide those services. Did a little thing for flu vaccine. That was the easiest thing I got done. It got done and ready to the governor really quickly. But it changed the fact that the new standard has found out that really at 50, it's better to make sure that people are getting it than 65. And we have a system in our state that if you are in the hospital, before you leave, it should be offered to you. It's not mandated that you take it, but also pneumonia, if you're 65, that is an offering. But to reduce that flu vaccine from being 65 to 50, there's so many compounding issues. And I think after some of the lessons we learned through the pandemic are ways that we can step in and accelerate prevention at any level is really good. So, those are a couple of things. Now, I'll tell you, there were some heartaches. There were some great things we did. There's some things I hope we will go back and work more on or find a way to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was actually the next topic that we were getting ready to.
Before we go into that, I just want to say, thank you for that. Because, Floyd County is very big when it comes to nursing homes, elder care, home care, as well as medical care. Medical is our largest industry here. Absolutely. And things like this are very important going forward for our community, because when you start talking about the option of having the pneumonia shot when you're leaving the hospital, a lot of people don't know how many complications happen to people, especially once they hit, over the age of 50, like Katie was saying, or especially around their 60s, when they leave the hospital and they get walking pneumonia and don't know it. And then they have to come back and get treated for other severe situations. And so something like that, and having the option for it, especially giving individuals the option for people that they care for, if they are in a nursing home or have home opportunities to where those vaccines can be provided, is really good.
And I really like the part that you were emphasizing on there, the options.
The options. That's the thing. That. And and that's, I will tout this. That's one thing that our Republican majority has been great about across the state when it comes to medical stuff, is giving people the option. Like, because that's the big thing. They make sure that everything is there for anyone who needs it or wants it, but it's not mandated. It's not mandatory.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So you were leading into a little something onto that, and that kind of goes into a little bit of the next subject that we were wanting to bring up. Was there anything that you saw that was going through the General Assembly this past session that you would have loved to have seen been passed, but it didn't quite make it through in order to make it to the governor's desk?
Well, there are a number, but that's part of it. There's work to go back and do, right? We can't get everything done at one time. So I would say that personally, agreement on the medical cannabis bill. The House did everything that we could on it. It did not come out the last day on the Senate. It was actually tabled by one vote, which is really hard, because there's so many people as well that really need and want that and believe in it. And we have a way to do it. It was done. The first bill was probably not as good to help people be licensed and do it as fairly and as quickly as we need it. I'm hoping that maybe there is some way to have an executive order that the governor can go back. I don't know that. That's my own personal hope, that we don't have to wait all the way until next year to make this happen for so many people who really would, profound seizure disorders and things like that really have been made better, had a much better life because of being able to have that access to pure medical grade cannabis oil.
Yeah.
So that would be one. Yeah.
My grandmother suffered from dementia and Alzheimer's, and she was in a lot of pain as towards the end of her days. And I think that would have been a far better way to help her be able to not only have an appetite, it would have extended the life. It would have extended the comfort of life.
Agree.
Much farther than what she was actually able to have because of the opioids, because of the morphine and everything else. Those types of things, they are not only profoundly addictive, but they just consume you from the inside out.
I agree. And, as Justin knows, I'm going through a similar situation. I'll rabbit hole for a second, but the woman who plays on The Big Bang Theory, who's actually a neurologist, has just come up with some form of a CBD oil or something of that nature that helps specifically for Alzheimer's patients. And so, hopefully this is something that Georgia can lean onto more on the medical side, because there are certain situations, especially for Georgians, that this can be very beneficial, because as we've seen in certain areas, opioids have failed the community.
Not just failed, but ravaged.
Yeah. I mean, like, led to full on addictions. I lost a friend to an opioid crisis when I was coming out of high school, and it's just, that route is not as beneficial as it may have once been, or as we see as time goes on, you see different variations in the medical field about what might have been beneficial may need to transition to something else. And I think this is without a doubt one of them.
Well, Northwest Georgia specifically is kind of the hot spot for opioid addiction. I mean, it is rampant here.
Yep.
So I think that could have been something that would really have been a life changer for not only people that needed it, but just people to keep it out of people's hands.
Absolutely.
That's right. I'll tell you another bill that I was involved in. I was to carry it, and the House actually was the abortion pill bill. And, it's so unfortunate during the pandemic. A lot of things happened. that made access to certain situations maybe a little too liberal. And this is one of those. President Biden chose to roll back, in effect, that a person would need to see a doctor to get the pill. We were not going to be talking about prevention of the pill, whether that's your personal. I mean, I have my own feelings that are quite strong, actually. But today that is legal. What should not happen, though, is that a telemedicine or a phone call is not enough to really know. A mother needs to be examined, need to know exact gestation period, exact, not close to, and then have follow-up care, as well as making sure with an ultrasound that it's not an ectopic pregnancy, because that can really lead to maternal mortality, which is something else that we're trying to tackle in our state. But the hemorrhaging, the things that can happen without that care is so important. Now, Bruce Thompson carried it in the Senate, and it came in the final few days of session, and it finally came out of rules with another bill attached. And so I had to hit the pause button, actually, and tell everybody to back off, that you cannot jump on this. That's something that happens. But another House member thought he had a great pathway for his bill, and it really slowed it up, maybe about 2 hours. But on the final day, 2 hours is a lifetime. Oh, yeah. So it did not get called up and make it out. And that was a real heartbreaking disappointment for me. I really, really hope we can address that. I would hope there's something else we can do, much like I said about the cannabis, that maybe there is an executive way to deal with it. But we really were ready to push back on the president. And it was a ferocious fight that was going to happen, no doubt, on the floor. And there probably was just not time for it.
It sounds like another good piece of legislation that might could be brought up is single issue.
Yeah.
Outside the budget, because I know the budget can't be single issue, right? Although, you could divide it into departments, but that's getting off the subject on that. But single issue legislation, particularly when you're dealing with the short term general assemblies that, like we see in Georgia, your part-term legislatures, making it to where the riders that are attached to things like that are not allowed, to where it's an easy to understand, not just for the legislators, but for anybody that would be interested in reading the law and trying to understand.
Or it needs to be truly like Con. Like, one thing that me and Justin talk about a lot is, we feel very strongly about abortion. And in that, we think that, one thing that also needs to be reformed, not just in the state, but in the country is adoption.
Oh, yes.
And so if there was something or some way to look at the two together, that I could be more understanding of attaching something about adoption to a, anti-abortion bill versus something that may be off skew or something of that nature that maybe just not as incohesive with the topic of the bill.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's a good way to bring it up. Actually.
Yeah.
I like that.
It was a great single issue bill.
Oh, yes.
When it started. And then the addition that was proposed was related to hospitals and nursing homes and visitation. And so they fell in the same code section. And that's what you deal with. You have to be in the same code section of Georgia law to actually attach. So it's not as easy to do that as it seems, but it felt like that was happening a lot this year, actually.
And we understand that.
And, there were a couple things that fell in that
the subsection. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's the subsection that's important.
and that actually leads us into the next section that we were wanting to kind of talk about and bring up, and to asking what your thoughts and opinions were on specific issues that were brought up throughout this session.
Sure.
You touched on at least two of them anyway, in regards to the mail-in pill as well as the access to medical cannabis. But so I wanted to get your thoughts on what happened with HB 1464, the election reform bill, and what it started out as and how it ultimately ended up
to what it is.
To what it is, to what it was passed.
Right.
And I kind of want to get your thoughts and ideas where you stand on where it began and where it ended up.
Or how that process even happened, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I think the House, had fully vetted the elections and the frustration of the elections and had a very strong measure with several steps that involved even chain of custody and a lot of really good things that we felt it was important to go back and do. As it passed that way out of the House, and certainly fairly partisan. That's how a bill like that would be. So that when you look at votes, you have to realize that some of them are. One of the tricks that was used a lot this year was anytime we would pass something that was important and meaningful like that, there was really one person most of the time that would stand up from the other party and say, to make a motion to reconsider. And when that happens, then we have to vote on it. And then if it starts it. So you see votes where we voted on one bill, like we voted yes, we voted no, we voted yes. It kept going on and on. And this was another bill that at the end fell into, trouble with being put on the table in the Senate, unfortunately. So there were parts that came out. They're important, but some were already being done, like allowing an employee to take time off to go vote. That one was able to stay there, but I had hoped for much more strident things involving our ballot boxes and some really good measures. So we left work to go back and do on that one too, as well. Every year, almost every year, I'm told, even before I was ever there, there's a little bit of work that needs to be done on elections. We learn something in each and every process, and not just the Republican wonderful conservatives that we have there right now, but even back in history through when the Democrats were in charge, there were steps to be taken. So, we will go back and see what we can do. Wish it did more, for sure.
Well, I will say, in my opinion, the most important part of that did get through on it with allowing the GBI to be able to come in and do investigations into it.
You're right. You're right.
Jamie and I have actually folks that we knew growing up with that we know firsthand.
Have some questionable situations.
Well, they're not questionable, they're fraudulent and felonious.
I'm not getting into the optics of it. But yeah, it's a very bad situation that needs to continue to be explored. And but I think overall, I think our assembly is going in the right direction. They've shown between the special session and between now that
and last session, absolutely
that they are
SB 202.
Yep, they are completely dedicated to understanding the needs of the people of the state, and we recognize that there were just some things that, in my opinion, that the Democrats took advantage of that weren't necessarily, it was a variation of interpretation of the law, and they took advantage of a time period that allowed for certain things to occur that, that will never happen again. And our Georgia Assembly took full stride to make sure that they definitely won't happen again. And I feel that our elections are now safer than they've ever been.
Jamie, you sure you don't want to join me in law school? The variations of the understanding the laws in that little quote there?
Maybe later.
So
let's finish my other objectives first.
Fair enough. So, all right. So, subject number 2, the hot button topic number 2, after election reform has always been, and quite frankly, will probably always be, firearms here in the state of Georgia.
Right.
So, constitutional carry, we know that it ended up getting through, and that's that was incredible, and I'm so glad that Kemp's going to be signing that one into law next week. So. That was a massive announcement, and I cannot express how happy I am that was going on. Actually,
absolutely,
we're working on getting some experts in that area to come on to the show with us and actually explain what this is going to allow to be done, as opposed to what was going on beforehand.
I said kind of give a
here and a now.
I said it last November. I said constitutional carry will be passed in Georgia, and I'm glad I don't have to recant that. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yes. Yeah. I know your opinion on it. I know your position on it, but let's hear it for everyone else that might have questions on it. What is your position and thoughts on HB 1358 and SB 319?
Well, they married each other eventually. They became one good, strong bill, which is really important. So both chambers were very involved in that discussion. Each had things that they really wanted in it. And I think at the end of the day, we got it to be the very best place that it could be to have permitless carry for those who actually would be licensed in that process. So, it's not a dangerous thing. It's a good thing. It'll be a new thing to some people, no doubt. I have my carry license, but it's good to know that, you got to, this is in Georgia. Now you got to comply with other states, and we're up here where we're kind of close to a couple of other states. So you have to be aware of that as well. It's not a federal thing. It's just for our state, but it's so strong and such a good step. And I think it it sets an example for other states, for our neighboring states also, and to continue to expand that throughout our nation. That freedom, you talk about liberty, that freedom to protect yourself, and in some of the spaces and places we're in right now, it's necessary, very necessary.
Yeah, and I think we had a national title situation here as opposed to a SEC championship situation.
Yeah.
Georgia got past the goal line before Alabama did.
I'm glad we won that one too. And one thing that I think is great is we are now halfway there. Georgia was the 25th state to get something like this done, and I think this is great mainly because me personally don't believe that I should have to notify the government that I'm carrying a firearm or that I have one. And so I think this is great that we all know that as Georgians, we share similar values in our core, regardless of our ethnicity or our background or things of that nature. And the right to own and carry firearms is one of them. And so I think it's great to see that come through the Georgia legislature.
I will say kind of maybe an idea for next time around, next session, when you get reelected. Maybe kind of one of the, what was it, the Firearms Protection Act, basically, that says that Georgia will not fund any federal agency in coming in and investigating or prosecuting any citizen here that they may deem as violating the NFA, particularly when it comes to kind of like what Texas has. If you have a suppressor, it's manufactured in Georgia and it's made in Georgia and never leaves the state of Georgia, then why should the federal government have any jurisdiction on what goes on with that, particularly because it does not involve interstate commerce?
Well, you know what? I think things like that, are things that definitely, I mean, how my opinion on it, I completely agree, but things like that are what need to be vetted, that's the
bureaucrat.
That's the beautiful of the show. You're there and I'm here. I think there's a process and an order for things. And I think that this is one of those things that, our state legislator is willing to look at, and they need, to take the opportunity to explore what's the best option for the state.
Absolutely.
Similar like we did with constitutional carry. A lot of people wanted the governor to push constitutional carry through 2 years ago. And I don't think we would have been able to get as great of legislation 2 years ago as we did now. And so I think taking that time to actually evaluate it and really process it and really vet it between both chambers allows for the opportunity to have great pieces of legislation like we had before.
So are you saying that it's just a campaign re-election piece of legislation?
That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that great things take time.
Understand? Okay, I understand. And I'm not disagreeing with you on that one.
You run too fast, you burn too many bridges.
That is true.
You know what? I will let my path forward be lit by the bridges behind me. All right, so on to the next one. So one of the big issues that we've seen going on this year, not only in Georgia but across the country, is CRT. It is a big issue. It's not just in other states, other counties, and everywhere. It is here in our home county here. Georgia, the state legislature passed a law that essentially reflected a lot of what President Trump was banning from federal institutions and federal organizations that were preaching this and were requiring this sort of teaching to going on. And that was in HB 1084. There was an addendum that was attached to it kind of at the last minute, like you were talking about in those last couple of hours. That basically that addressed the transgender issue in high school sports. So can you give us a little bit more insight into that piece of legislation as well?
Well, and of course, it was very politically divided in that vote, without a doubt. The conversation was long and loud, I would say, too, from many people from the other side of the aisle. It's very important that we teach true history. Yes. Whatever true history is needs to be taught. And that's what this is about. It's about not having a divisive concept, not something that is a teacher's thought or a group's thought or a school board's thought. It's about sticking to the facts and making sure that you teach all in a very fair way and let young people certainly have that exposure, but not be led in a certain way. And the challenge of it, really girls' sports particularly, because that is most impacted by this, has become louder and louder. And while the High School Association has some purview over it, they actually at the very end, I'm told, asked for a little bit of help. Maybe they didn't want too much, but they wanted to have a little bit to back them up on the decisions that they make. So that is what we did. And I'm so glad we did. It's more important than ever. We're seeing it. You know, I don't get to watch the news as much as I'd like to while I'm in Atlanta, but
you're not
certainly when I pick up a paper, you see it nonstop. There are places where this has really come into play and impacted girls' scholarships, their future in college or other sports, that we can't have that. So.
Absolutely.
And honestly, you said something that honestly kind of I didn't know and gives me a lot of hope, you know, because one thing that I think is important is that when you have an organization like the Georgia High School Association, when it comes to sports, for them to actually say, okay, we need a little bit more guidance, that is in itself is impactful, because a lot of times, like the NCAA, you're seeing where, you know, these kind of organizations are going to make their own decisions regardless of university policy or regardless of, you know, anybody else's opinion. They're making their own organizational decisions that impact everyone. And so to see kind of this, you know, I guess you could say collaboration between the association and the assembly shows again why Georgia is such a great state. Because, you know, we're all having the same conversations, but the ability for the heads of these organizations to be able to go and, you know, say, let's have this conversation with our legislators is very important, because that's how we craft, you know, I mean, a great society.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Although, and again, I do take the more aggressive stance on that. I wish that the speaker had not stood in the way of the Senate bill that had been pushed through.
Oh, I don't know about that.
So, but yeah, that one legally outright just banned it, and it took it out of the Georgia Association's hands, and it made it a more of a legal termination as opposed to a ruling based upon an organization or an affiliation. So I honestly think that would have been, in my personal opinion, it would have been the way to go with that.
I understand that, but again, great things take time. You know what I mean? And though we all know how important this is to save girls' sports, like absolutely important. You know, sometimes you just can't ram power down people's throats. I mean, just being blunt with it. You have to make sure that what you're doing doesn't leave any pitfalls down the road.
And I'd agree with that. But again,
you'll learn this when you get in law school.
Well, again, I would say that, you know, you're taking this and making it a law to where it's a lot higher of a legal bar to cross over as opposed to an association's ruling, which 90% of the time they're going to run from any lawsuit that's filed.
I agree with that. But it's better to make sure that you have all doors closed so that you don't even have to settle.
Well, there are all doors closed if there's a law that's passed with it. Well, anyway, moving forward, Jamie's such a good guy.
I think he's ready to run. I'm hearing his strong negotiating skills.
We are we're working on something along that nature. We're slowly infiltrating
in due time.
everywhere.
Next bill.
He doesn't want to show his hand too quickly. So the next one, of course, that came up, that was a massive issue. You didn't just see it on or see it floating around the General
Mhm.
Assembly. You saw it all over social media. You saw it all over local news and everything. And quite frankly, the one time that I went down there this session, down to just to see what was going on, I saw more lobbyists there on this issue than I have ever seen in my entire life. And I've spent as a lobbyist down there myself, I've spent a little bit of time. But the issue involving the expansion of gambling in the state of Georgia,
Mhm.
and it's SB 142 and SR 135.
Right.
They were ultimately constitutional amendments that were defeated in the Senate, but then the House committee kind of revived them and brought them back up. They died after that as well. But we kind of want to get your thoughts and opinions on the expansion of gambling in the state of Georgia, and see where you land on that issue yourself.
I would say that I have always, if we have a constitutional amendment on the ballot, the question, I certainly would never want to stand in the way of the voters. I want to give them that opportunity to say that. But this is not the first year that it has met with defeat at the end. And we just really could not get the numbers in any way to move either forward. That's the whips and the deputy whips role, is to come around with the questions and let us look at them and kind of see. And the numbers just were not going to be there. And while I've been in the House, which is a good long time, we try not to have things fail, because then it's harder to bring them back. Whatever, even if it's something that you really don't like, it's better to just let that, have another chance later, or die in a quiet, dark closet somewhere if it's something that's really not any good. But, it's such an interesting conversation. And I think if we could have done a pure sports betting measure, that it would have had a chance. But it just gets a little too complicated about things that need to be added on, or where the money needs to go. And the divisions begin to come. So once again, it did not. And while you may have sensed there was a strong lobby working on it, it's not nearly as strong as it was last year, or maybe even the year before.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
With something like this, it reminds me a lot of like Sunday sales, when that situation was going on with, when do we sell alcohol on
Mhm.
Sundays? That was a conversation for a long time. And again, kudos to the assembly, because regardless of what your position is on the issue, it's something that really needs to be decided on by the voters, either at large, or on a county by county basis, because this is Georgia. You know what I mean? We're different regionally as well as countywide on what our opinions are. And
we have our own belt that runs through the state.
Without a doubt, we call it the red wall, and what's best for Atlanta is not necessarily what's best for Northwest Georgia, Northeast Georgia, or South Georgia as a whole. And the idea that this is something that needs to be done by the people is, I think, something that really needs to be championed.
And I like that idea. I've heard Burt Jones kind of express that same sentiment as well, and I never really thought of it or applied that logic to this piece of legislation. But I actually really like that idea. Me myself personally, I am not a huge proponent, and I'm not 100% in favor of bringing in gambling and sports betting and everything into the state, particularly at that level, because of, we not only see a massive addiction with the opioids here. Just think of how bad it could get once you add on that extra layer of that addictiveness that can be associated with that.
Sir,
but
I'm a Falcons season ticket holder, so sports betting is not a good topic for me right now.
Yeah, well, it's because you lose everything unless you vote against them.
I forget. Calvin Rick, the star wide receiver, was betting on himself and the Falcons, you know what I mean, and losing. And so you see the problem here, and he's suspended for this next season, but that's not neither here nor there. But,
but I do like that. I do like that idea that was brought up there. Leave it to the voters, and at least allow it to come forward and allow for the voters to decide that, as opposed to the legislature or to the elected officials. Since it has to be added to the Constitution, at least allow for folks to put their input on it.
Absolutely.
I really like that one. So another big issue that's being brought up nationwide, and we've seen several states take issue on this and bring it to light and pass legislation on it. And Georgia made the attempt to do something with this as well. Ultimately, it failed. But under SB 393, the social media censorship piece of legislation that would have essentially blocked any sort of big tech from removing, or at least for the statewide initiative, removing any views or political views that they did not agree with or they found contrary to their beliefs. Where do you land on that particular issue?
It never became the loud discussion over in the House. It really didn't even make it to that point. But we did look, and this measure also didn't make it out. But in the House, we looked at trying to set some safeguards so that students couldn't access obscene material on the internet. And I think we will go back and do that next year for sure. Sometimes those conversations are so large, it's a little hard to get in one, like you say, compressed 40 days, 3 months. It's a little hard, but I think there'll be more and more work on some of those measures in the interim as well. They're not gone or forgotten for sure.
It's difficult when you have a part-time legislature to get big global issues looked at in full and get things done in a very meaningful, impactful way. But at the same time, present company excluded, I am glad when the General Assembly is not in session because my life's not in turmoil and up in the wind.
Well, Justin knows I'm a big, I cannot stand Section 230 of SR, well, the federal code. I'm not even gonna get into the section, but anyway. And so this kind of tacks on to that, and we see it across the nation right now as it becomes a bigger issue as you see a more left-leaning social media board ownership of these platforms, try to exclude certain views. And we talked about this a couple shows ago where, even Facebook, when they were in, hearings, came out and said, our fact checkers are not actually telling facts or checking facts, they're checking opinions. And so when you start to really look at it, you really need more. I say this all the time. We either need our own platform to where we can allow actual free speech, or we need to champion more people like Elon Musk,
exactly,
who just and just took over Twitter and is going to allow free speech to happen.
Yeah, that's really good. It's so important. I'm hoping that maybe there's a little bit of an evolutionary process going on in it, that they're going to figure out what they tried to do didn't work, and we might be in a bigger mess because of it than anyone ever imagined.
That's very true. Absolutely. Well, Katie, I want to say thank you for coming on to the show with us. We've got about a minute left in our recording time. Thank you for coming on, and thank you for giving us your insight into all of this and what all happened with it, and really giving us a firsthand view that a lot of folks just don't get the opportunity to have and to see.
Yeah, and again, thank you to echo what Justin said. And it's very rare that people actually get, this kind of information unless they actually go out and, they have a personal relationship with their legislator or they spend the 40 days down there. So I think this is going to be great for our listeners. Yeah, I think it's been great for our listeners. So thank you.
Oh, thank y'all. It was truly a very positive, historic, impactful session for Georgia and for the people of Georgia. They will feel it in their pocketbooks. They will see it in their freedoms. I mean, I think of the freedoms we did for students, for parents, for not having to wear a mask, for not having to have a vaccine passport, so many things that are so good. So we need to cling to the good and celebrate the fact that there is more we can go back and do.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you. And as always, we like to close out the show and saying, please like and share all of our content that we put out there and produce. That allows us to be seen by a wider audience. Always subscribe to all of the platforms where you see our content being put out there. We're across the globe on all of this stuff. Yeah. We're Facebook, we're Twitter, we're Rumble,
Spotify, YouTube,
Instagram. Yeah, Spotify has picked us up, we're on
Net News Network.
Yeah, if you go to Net News Network conservatives.net and you run a search for Conservatives Talk, you'll find our show there, and you'll be able to see that as well. It's an actual national platform. So as always, please, and if you're able to, of course, if you're able to go to our website at conservativestalk.org, that's conservativestalk.org, and hit the sponsor tab at the top right-hand corner and help us out with whatever you can. It goes, I can't even begin to express how much that helps us to be able to produce more of this content and put it out and spread it even wider than what Jamie and I are able to on our own. So,
as always, you've had time with Justin and Jamie on Conservatives Talk, and we'll hope to see you next week.
Thank you.